take notes or whatnot, you have an opportunity to go back and look at that. You can also then share that with other folks. All right. So I start with kind of a setting the stage for what the OVT tests looked like this past year. And I start with looking at, as a whole across the state, how are our yields in corn, specifically for the OVT, compared to what they've been for the last, in this case, the last 7 years. And we actually had a very successful year yield-wise. We lost a couple locations, which I'll get into here in a minute, but we had a fairly successful year yield-wise across the board. A lot of that was good timely rainfall. We didn't have a ton of heat. We had some in July, we had some in June. But for the majority of locations, we had either good timely rainfall or actually excessive rainfall early on, which did affect one of our locations. But as you can see here, compared to 2024, which was a hard year overall, we were about 20 bushels higher across the state, which is fairly significant than what we saw back in 2024. Our second highest overall, our highest was in 2021, which was a very good year for corn yields overall. So we didn't quite hit that record year in 2021, but we had a fairly successful year this last year. So that's across the state. That's looking at all different hybrids, all different maturities. What I like to do then is drill down into a maturity and do we see any differences by yield by maturity? In this case, okay, here we go. In this case, we're looking at, yes, I'm screen sharing going away. Thank you. I'm looking at all 9 years. This is not just looking at last year. I'm looking at all 9 years of data in the database, and I'm asking the question, if I'm a grower this coming year, particularly with commodity prices being what they are and with input prices being what they are, I need to be very key and selective about the hybrids and the maturities I'm selecting and I'm purchasing for that operation. So where do I really need to focus my effort? And the long and short of this graph is that you really have good opportunities from about 110 to 120 day hybrid. Now, the majority of our testing happens in this 110 to 120. So I would take this 99 to 106 with a little bit of a grain of salt. Yes, it's lower, but we're looking at maybe hundreds of looks versus thousands of looks here in this 110 to 120. But overall, you see a good even yield. Yes, if you said, Ryan, I absolutely have to have you make a selection for me, I would say probably 114. This is fairly significant. You're talking about a 5 bushel difference here compared to the maturity groups around it. I'm sure this is because we've had some good high yielding hybrids in this maturity group, and that's what's driving that. And again, you see a very similar trend maybe in that 119. The goal here is not necessarily to pick one relative maturity and stick with it. The goal here is to say, hey, I can pick a range of relative maturities, kind of set myself up to be risk averse. So I'm not putting all my eggs into a single maturity basket, and I'm still going to be successful, whether that's from 111 all the way to 119 day hybrid or 120 day hybrid. I'm going to be successful. If I'm a grower, I'm probably going to take this data and say, okay, I'm going to pick 110, 114, 118, 119, split that across my operation. And that way I kind of mitigate any kind of that weather risk that we see from time to time, whether that's where pollination is happening during hot, dry weather, or if we have different, weather events that happen during the season. But overall for the OVT, very, very plateaued look if you look at maturity, yield by maturity across the last 9 years. There we go. So we talked about overall yield. We talked about relative maturity. What did that look like if you drill it down to a location view? And this is all 11 of our locations for 2025. You'll notice that there's 2 reds out in the Piedmont. Those are 2 locations that we had to drop this last year. This Yadkin County location up here, we planted it. We got about 4 to 5 inches of rainfall the week after we planted it, and half of the tests did not come up. It rained hard, packed that soil down because it was a conventional till location. And then when we went back a couple weeks later, maybe half of the site had emerged. So we just had to walk away from that site. The other one was this Rowan site. It actually looked good for most of the year. We had good vegetative growth. So we really didn't have any kind of early season stress. What really hurt us, and I'll go into that here in a minute, is hot, dry weather in July. Hot, dry weather, particularly on a clay soil in July. That tends to be a little bit more of a droughtier look than what we see on the sand because it takes out any kind of available water, gets tied up in that clay soil, and has a harder time being allowed to be used or utilized by that corn crop. So we had good vegetative growth, but once you got to the crops itself, the ears were very small. We averaged about 40 to 50 bushels in that location, and it wasn't enough. Like, it's not high enough yield. Usually my floor for corn is about an 80 bushel. That wasn't high enough to get good separation to really tell you anything about hybrid performance in those situations. So those are the two that we lost. Other than that, overall good yields, a little bit over 208 bushels in the Piedmont. Person County here planted late April. Up here was a really good location for us. No till at about 235. Union County down here in southern Piedmont, a little bit more stress, and I'll show kind of an image of what that looked like from this last year, based off of really just elevation within the location itself. But still got 180 bushel average there. Coastal Plain was a very good success story for us this last year. Planted mostly in mid to late April. Good yields in Robinson. This is probably a record yield for us in that Robinson County location. Almost 237 bushel. Edgecombe, which was irrigated for us, a little bit over 200. The Sampson location was a little low. Most of that was due to heavy rainfall that we had throughout the season. So it was not a hot, dry situation. It was really more of we just had way too much water and couldn't get all the water off the field. In fact, we had to drop the medium test from this location because it just drowned out for most part. So this is only the late test, but you're about 143 bushels there. And then Bertie had actually pretty good yields, had some variability here, again, based off of wet weather than dry weather, but overall fairly good. And then Tidewater was, again, our winner, just as usually our highest yielding region out here on the coast. Pasquotank, Beaufort, and Pamlico all, above 230, 240 bushels. So a good yield year for us. Obviously, we had some stressier locations out here in the Piedmont, especially. What does that look like for us? Well, when I saw this corn, I tried to wrap my head around why am I seeing such small ears? And the only thing I could think of was maybe we're looking at lack of rainfall. I mean, talking to the station superintendent, he kind of indicated the same thing. So I looked at the weather data. So this is our weather data. I've got Robinson County, which is a really good yielding location for us this last year. This red line is high temperature, so we're looking for any events above 95 degrees because that's usually when the corn crop will shut down. And then these black bars that you're seeing at the bottom here are all the rain events. You see for Robinson, fairly equal rain events across the board, anywhere from half an inch to an inch, every week or two. So fairly steady rainfall across the board, even with, this is actually a hotter location than what Rowan was. Rowan, you see this drop here in August, which we know we were really cold in August comparatively. But overall, even in June and July, this Rowan location was a lot cooler. What you don't have in this Rowan location is notice that you get this big rainfall event in early July. And then while there are black bars here, we're talking like 1/10 of an inch at most. Not enough to really fill that soil profile, really give water, release water to this corn crop to use. So if you look at the rainfall, Robinson rainfall, you're almost 5 inches in June, a little bit over 3 inches in June in Rowan. Very similar, but you're 4 inches less in July, and almost 2 inches of that was on a single rain event. So you went almost 30 days or 20 days in July without any substantial rainfall. This location was planted in early May, so we're pollinating about that same time, and that resulted in some, smaller ears, lower incidence of pollination. We didn't have barrens. I didn't see a whole lot of barren ears out there, but we just did not have very successful pollination. And a lot of that's tied to just lack of rainfall there in that July period, and being on the clay soil type, not being able to release that water. So that's why we had to drop Rowan. And we talked about dropping Surrey earlier. I talked about the variability even in the Union County location. So you're looking at the yields from our medium tests. So darker green is better. Blue is above we set a limit. So blue is above that limit. So you're talking anywhere from 250 all the way down to 130 to 115. This dark green part you're seeing here is at the low spots of the field. These lighter spots were at the higher spots of the field. So it really was a rainfall, effect. This added variability to this location. We were still able to report data from that site, even with that variability, but you can see how much variability we had just based off the available rainfall from that site. So not probably uncommon from what y'all experienced this last year. Overall, I think corn yields were a lot better, absolutely better than what we saw last year, especially in the coastal plain. But still saw some variability, particularly out west on those clayer soils where we didn't get that rainfall in July. Any questions on kind of the data setup for the OVT so far? And again, I can't hear anybody talk. So if you have any questions, just type them out in chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so I'm gonna move on now to talking about the OVT data. This is not, and the way I frame these is not really a variety selection tool training. We're using the variety selection tool to look at data and to kind of identify hybrids and hybrid fits. But I'm not going through like the hit this button, hit this button. If you want some more information on that specifically, just let me know. I'm happy to Zoom call with you or come meet you and run you through how to use that tool. But I'm going to kind of source the data and show you how I would go through making selections based off the data available to me so that you have an idea of what your options are, or what you can tell your growers your options are, and help them work through that data themselves. So to start with, what does our OVT setup look like? I always get a question of, okay, what's your population? What's your row spacing? What's your nitrogen load? All those things. So here's my fertility setup. We're 20 gallons per acre, 1027.0 in a 2x2x2 band at planting. I will say I understand this is a very expensive treatment. You could probably get away with 10 gallons per acre of this. I've seen more success using this treatment, particularly early on, early season growth of corn, than anywhere else. If we have an issue, and we've had issues with application on our planter before, where the solution's been a little clumpy and is clogged, I can tell you to the plant where that solution stopped working just based off of what it looked like at V5, V6. Now, I can't tie a yield level to it. I can't tell you that that's going to give you 5 to 10 bushels. Dad's done some of that work and shown that it works where you need it, and where you don't need it, you don't necessarily have to have it. For the OVT, we have it as a standard because it gives us our early season growth. We then follow that up with 15 gallons per acre with 32% broadcast with herbicide right after the planter. And then we come back at V5, V6. Now, V5, V6 is because we're limited on how tall of our equipment is to get over the crop. At V4, V5, we're using a high clearance tractor, but even at V4, V5, you're getting close to snapping some stalks. So we don't have a high boy, we don't have a big sprayer like that. So that's why we're so early with that application. But we're anywhere from, I don't know that this number is accurate. I got to double check with Jeremy. We're anywhere from 35 to 42 gallons per acre, 32%. I can't talk. Broadcast. Now we do drop nozzles. We don't broadcast over the top because we're putting out some conventional herbicides. We're putting out steadfast Q, some status sometimes. So those things can't go in the whirl. So we're broadcasting in between the rows. But that's a OVT specific thing, not necessarily a management practice that I would recommend. And then planting populations for the Coast Plain and Piedmont locations were 28,000 per acre. For those 3 Tidewater locations, so Beaufort, Pamlico, and Pasquotank, we're at 32,000 per acre. This has been forever. I think this has been at least the last 20 years that we've been doing this population split. We see that there's a more opportunity for a higher population in those Tidewater regions because we have better opportunity for water in those spaces. We're a little bit more water limited, as we saw in the Piedmont and in the Coastal Plain, pretty much year in, year out. So we look at lower yields, or lower populations. Now, this fertility program right here is roughly, if these numbers are correct, 210 pounds of nitrogen this year. I would argue, particularly based on some data that Dad's got from some of his testing, that we can get by with at least 30 pounds less than this. And we're going to do some work with the corn growers to kind of identify that across regions. So we kind of hone in on what an ideal nitrogen level is. But our typical target every year is anywhere from 180 to 200 pounds of nitrogen. I'd like to see, I think we have some opportunities to lower that down, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Row spacings are on 30-inch, and then no-till sites. These are our 3 no-till sites this last year. All the rest of our sites are conventional tilled. And then we just had the 1 irrigated site, Edgecombe. Row N can be irrigated. We just didn't have it set up to do that this last year. I did have a version of this. Curtis, it looks like you're saying something, but I won't be able to hear you. Can you type it in the chat? Really wish I could get this microphone working. I think Rod might be my transcriber here for a minute. Thank you. All right, while we're doing that, I'm going to come out of this and we're going to go into the data itself.
What did he ask us to do in the chat? Does anyone I missed a little
Okay,
bit of that.
so now I want to go to our data sources. Hopefully we can see now.
Right. He just said he thought Curtis had a question, just told Curtis to put it in chat
Okay.
because he can't hear.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that's the start. That's the setup for how the data was executed, how the data was collected this last year. For the last, I want to say 4 to 5 years, we've had two ways of getting data to y'all. The first is through our OVT website, so ncovt.com. If you visit that site, this is what the homepage looks like. You can go to corn. You can go to the year that you're interested in. In this case, it's 2025. And you can see a bunch of links to PDFs for both how hybrids perform statewide, how they've done for single locations. And a lot of these are, these little PDFs that you see for Piedmont, Coastal Plain, and Tidewater. These are all reports out of the variety selection tool. So you actually don't have to go to the variety selection tool. Rod, if you're interested in say, I want to see what hybrids you're recommending for multiple years from the Tidewater, I can click on this. It takes me to a table of those hybrids. This is pulled straight out of the variety selection tool. We'll see very similar hybrids when we go and do the variety selection tool look here in a minute. But if you don't have time or you don't want to try to go through all that data itself, you can look at these static data tables and kind of pull out those higher performing hybrids by region. If you're like, yeah, that's nice, but I want to mess with the data itself and I want to do my own views and everything else, we have the Excel versions of these tables here. So medium corn data tables, late corn data tables, these are Excel links. So they'll take you to the data itself and you can sort it and visualize it in any different ways that you want to. But this is where I would start. If you're new to using the variety selection tool, if you just want a quick and dirty look at, okay, I'm in the Piedmont, tell me what hybrid I should be looking at. These are all reports out of the variety selection tool. You can look at those tables. Now you can't make comparisons. You can't do some more detailed things that we'll see here in a minute, but you can get a very quick look and say, okay, this is what I want to focus on. These are the hybrids I want to focus on for my selection this coming year. We'll talk about it here in a couple minutes, but for me, most of my selections need to come out of this multiple year data set. So where it says multiple year data, anything, I want to focus on these regional looks because we have enough data to say how those hybrids perform in those regions. So if you're in the Coastal Plain or Piedmont, I've listed the counties that, at least for the OVT, that represented this last year. Start here because this is where the majority of your selections need to come from, okay? Those are proven to be successful in those environments over a period of years. And if we see it over if it's consistent enough over a number of years, we feel pretty good about how it's going to perform moving forward. We need to be as risk averse as possible. This is your least risky choices right here. Now, you can't stop here because there may be inventory issues. You may be able to find hybrids you want. There might be hybrids here that just aren't available locally. And then you want to look at, hybrids that might be replacing some of these older hybrids moving forward. So you got to look at the single year data as well. And that will give you some ideas of newer hybrids that are coming on board, how they're performing. I would look statewide when you're doing this and not at specific regions because we don't have enough data to say a single year hybrid is going to work based off of that. But use these data tables to kind of fill in the gaps of newer hybrids you want to try. Try it out on 10, 20 acres or a single field, something like that. So that's where the static data tables are. I have corn silage data I'm loading here in a little bit, hopefully today. But if you want a quick, dirty look, this is where I would go. This gets you started. This at least answers the initial question of what hybrid should I look at, okay? So that's where I'm starting. Now, if you have some interest and you have some time, you can get into some more details by going to the variety selection tool itself. I'm going to pull that up here now, if I can find out where I put it. There we go. This is the landing page for that variety selection tool. It is showing correctly. We're looking at corn, so I'm going to choose corn. And then I'm going to go to OVT data, and that's going to give me everything. Now I'm on a brand new computer, so we'll see how this works out for me. This is going to show me everything um, that we tested, and it's going to show me all of the years of testing that I want to look at. So like right now I'm focusing on 2025. I'll be able to see 3 years of data here, even though this is starting at 2025. We talk about yield versus percent trial mean. I think either are valid to use to make hybrid selections. For me, if I'm looking at multiple year data, I'm probably going to look at percent of trial mean. That's comparing how a hybrid performed against all other hybrids in the test. And that standardizes that yield across environments and across years, right? So if I've got like I had a good year this year for yield, we showed that early on. That's going to skew the data towards this year based off of raw yield. Whereas if I use percent trial mean, that takes out that data skew that I would see because 2025 happened to be a better year than 2024. So I'd use percent trial mean when I'm looking at multiple year data. If I'm looking at single year data, I can use raw yield and that's fine. I'll probably still use percent trial mean in that space anyway, just to keep things consistent. But either are valid when you're making these selections. I'm going to look at percent trial mean. I can't wait to see how this is going to work for me. This is all the data. Hopefully you can see that. Yes. So this is all of the data. I'm going to get rid of this little thing that we had for all the locations in 2025, for the regions, for all the locations within that region, for Coastal Plain, Piedmont, Tidewater, and then the averages. We'll scroll over. So you get the 2025 averages. So this is everything from just this year. And then you get the 3-year averages. So this is everything from 2023 to 2025. I'm going to focus to start with on that multiple year data because that's where I want to make the majority of my selections because I know that those are going to perform well for me. Now I'm going to do some filtering here. You don't have to worry about this. All I'm doing is taking out the 1 year, the brand new hybrid. So I'm telling it I just want trial years number greater than 1 because I don't want just 1 year data. I want 2 and 3 year data, right? So I'm going to filter out all the hybrids that were just 1 year, just brand new this year. That limited my set a little bit, but over here, and it's on a different monitor for me, you should be able to see Y2, Y3s. Those are 2 and 3 year data for all these different hybrids. So I'm gonna look at multiple year data. I'm filtering out all of the single years, and now I'm gonna talk since Rod's camera is on. Rod, I'm gonna start with you. I'm gonna look at Tidewater for multiple years. So you can click on this header. You can sort it high to low. This is high to low. So green down to red is high to low. You click it again, you can do low to high or random. The arrow here tells you what direction you're going in. I want to look high to low. And then these are the hybrids that, if they're green to blue, performed above average in that environment. Now I'm looking just at Tidewater because I have enough data to look at Tidewater. And it tells me how those hybrids performed in that environment, okay? I have not, just to let y'all know, I've not separated this out by maturity. We talked about earlier that yeah, there's a little bit of difference in a 114 or a 119. I've not done any kind of filtering here. I'm looking at all maturities. So we're going to see that when we pull this into a compare view, that we've got a lot of different options for maturity. In fact, that D60 TC45, I want to say is a 120. It might be a 119. But it's on the late side of everything, and it's showing up towards the top of the table over, I got to lean over because of the long monitor, 2 years of data in the Tidewater. But you're going to see some earlier hybrids in here as well. I want to say this FS6306 is a 113, but I, again, might be wrong. The goal here is I want to look at anything that's in this blue category. Now, Ryan's rule of thumb when it comes to percent of trial mean is 3% or higher. Very arbitrary, very, you could pick a different number if you wanted to. For me, what I've seen year over year is if you're below 3% of a trial mean, you're within that noise range of everything else. You're within kind of a statistical similarity to any random hybrid that you could have just picked, Instead of having an intentional pick there, you've just picked a random hybrid and you're not seeing a whole lot of difference there. So I usually focus anything 3% higher. I'm not going to go all the way down to 3% because you're talking, I want to say 20 different hybrids, maybe 15. I'm just going to pick the top 10 here. That again is an arbitrary number of hybrids to pick. You can pick any number that you want here. If you have different companies that, like if you can't get Revere or if you can't get Axis and you can only get Dynagro, like you can sort to just Dynagro if you want to and just look at that space. You can do that same filter here where I just did number of trial years. You can do a lot of different things here, and this is the power of the variety selection tools. I can tell it that I just want to see multiple year data. Just want to see certain companies. I just want to see certain maturities if I wanted to. I'm looking at everything just for simplicity of looking at the data, but you have that option if you really want to drill down. Now I selected the top 10 here. It's telling me I've got 10 selected, and then I'm going to compare. So this little compare button here is going to take me to a completely different window. And then I've got to do a little, or some trickery that we've got to do right now until they fix some bugs. If you come into this space and you see nothing here, go to filters and tell it that you don't want correlated data, and it will pull in all of your data. Okay. So this is everything. These are the 10 hybrids that I asked it to look at. I do not know if you can see all of that or not based off the screen. You can. Okay. I can look at the company. I can look at the trait. I can look at the BT status. Now, why does it matter I need to look at the BT status? Well, there is a non-BT hybrid in this top 10 set. There is a non-BT hybrid here that's performing in the top 10 over multiple years in the Tidewater region. That's at DCAB 6356. I can look at the relative maturities. I was right. D60 is a 120. What was I right on 6306? I was. It's 113. You know, look at the range of relative maturities we're looking at here. You're 113 to 120. You have a lot of options across maturity zones. You don't have to focus on a single one. I can look at its yield. I can look at percent trial mean. I can look at whether it was in the top yield group or not. So if it's in that statistical, if you remember the bolded, top yield group, not statistically different from the top yielder, this is a percent of time it was doing that. I can look at its test weight. And then we've got some other agronomic performances in here as well. We have ear height, we have stalk height. One gap we have at the OVT level is we don't have a lot of disease ratings for these hybrids. A lot of disease ratings you'll find are from the companies themselves. Part of it is we've not seen a lot of opportunistic disease for a number of years. That's not to say it hasn't existed. It's just not existed widely enough at these locations to take ratings on. I'm working with Daisy to see if we can, she is aware of these tests. She actually has these files every single year to see if we can start getting maybe some more opportunistic ratings done, and maybe start looking at if there's opportunities for us to do like a subset of testing on disease ratings. But for right now, we don't have a lot of disease data like we do for soybeans or we do for wheat. But you have a lot of different metrics here that you can look at. The cool thing is, and this is something that we started last year, and I want to thank all the agents on the call that have had corn hybrid testing that gave me their data from last year. We're doing that again this year and pulling that in. Is that you don't have to just say, okay, this is just the OVT data. What about other things? You can click on this tab up here that says County Data Corn, and now it tells you how those same hybrids that you just selected performed at a county level. Now, I don't have all of them. This D60 TC45 for the data I was given wasn't tested at a county level, but this FS line was, this Axis line was, this Revere line was, this DCAB line was. That's the power here. You don't just have to say, oh, well, wait, the OVT, this is how it performed the OVT, but that's a small plot test. Look, how does it perform on a, if a grower grows it on a larger equipment scale, you can actually see that. Now, one gap we have, and this is something I'm working on to try to get fixed. Like, this is showing everything. This is not just looking at Tidewater. If you remember before, we just pulled in Tidewater. So I can take out all of the other locations here. No, Del, the 2025 data is not in the system yet. I'm working working frantically in the background to try to get that organized into a database format so I can get that in, because this is a very powerful option for growers to be able to look at these hybrids across different areas. When we do a compare, even though I told it I was only looking at Tidewater, it pulls everything in. So the data you're seeing here, like obviously Alamance County is not in the Tidewater, not unless it's moved recently. But you can tell it, okay, I want to just focus on locations that are in the Tidewater. Again, we're looking at agent data right now. This should automatically update. It's not automatically updating. Take these out, click this button, click that button again. And now it's just focused on Camden or whatever you selected. So now you've dropped out some of these, like that FS line was mostly out west that I was looking at. For Camden Pascotank, we have this Axis line, we have this Revere line. It did fairly well, particularly that Revere line in agent testing. You have that Dynagrow line. It did well in agent testing. So we can correlate what we're looking at on the OVT side with what we're looking at on an agent side. Does that make sense? It's really about how many sources of data and how much data can I give you as an agent, as a retailer, as a grower, to be able to say, okay, the OVT says that this Dynagrow line, and this is also not right because it's showing all locations. So let me fix that real quick. It's saying this Dynagrow line is 4.3% of trial mean for just the Tidewater. What does that mean? If I look at a larger location, it's 3.7% of trial mean. If I look at agent data, that for me as a grower says, okay, that's probably a good option over multiple years. Now, obviously, this agent data is just from 2024. We're going to build that out. I'm trying to go back to get historical data. That's going to take a while, but I am working on 2025 data to get that in as soon as I can, so we can look at those very similar looks. I'm going to link this into the chat. This is just for Tidewater for multiple year. But if you want to mess around with this, you can click that link and it'll take you specifically to this compare page. And you can start looking at those hybrids. I got to title it before I put it in the chat. You can look specifically at those looks. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that piece? And again, I can't hear anybody, so just type them in chat if you have anything. I've profusely apologized for how this is set up today. I'm probably just going to go lay down in a ditch somewhere afterwards, so I don't have to think about it. All right, so that's Tidewater. We can do a very similar thing. Okay, I'm not in Tidewater. I'm in the Piedmont. Again, I'm gone back. I closed that compare window. I'm going back to just the Piedmont view. I'm going to take out these 10 that I looked, but I do want to point out something here real quick. I've sorted based off of Piedmont high to low for multiple years, right? So you've got green all the way down to blue, that you're above average. You're going to see these check marks right here. These are the check marks that I selected for Tidewater. Notice how they've changed. They're not all clustered together anymore, right? I'm looking at a Piedmont specific look, but I left the check marks in from Tidewater. Those aren't necessarily the same looks. You're not necessarily going to see the same hybrids. Are you seeing D60 and this axis line? Yeah, you are. But that Dynagrow 58TC94 is further down on that list than it was before. And you pulled in some other hybrids. The 6835 that wasn't in that list for Tidewater is showing up now in that list for Piedmont. This is the power of looking at this at a regional level, really drilling down to how these hybrids fit. You know, we're not going to be able to get to a field level just yet. We don't have enough data there, but we can get to a regional level over multiple year data and say, how are these hybrids fitting by region? And pull out some that we would not have looked at if we're just looking at a statewide data table. So I'm going to look at these top 10 again. I'm going to do the exact same thing, and we'll link it back into the chat so that you all have that ability to kind of play with it later. So there's 10 there. 10, again, is arbitrary. You can have as many as you want or as few as you want. Again, you're going to start with an OVT data look. I've got to, unfortunately, filter. This is one of the bugs that I'm trying to get fixed, so that this is automatic for y'all and y'all don't have to do this every single time you do this. So now I'm just looking at Piedmont performance for these different hybrids. I don't think we have a non-BT showing in the Piedmont. We don't. So these are all BT hybrids. We're anywhere from, again, 120 to 113. So you've got a good spread of relative maturities there. And then county level data as well. I want to say, really, East Slugs. Yeah, you're gonna have 3 that are showing up from that Piedmont location. All 3 of those are 8.3, 4.3, and 4.2% above trial mean. So looking really good, you know, kind of supporting what we're seeing on the OVT side as well. Again, this is just for Piedmont. Let me link this and put this into the chat so that you can, if you're in the Piedmont, you want to play with those or the other ones, you can. Okay. And then we'll do Coastal Plain real quick. Coastal Plain will actually be a little bit more fleshed out because we have so many locations, particularly on the agent data side in the Coastal Plain. When you look at the number of counties, when I'm putting those agent databases together, you look at the number of counties that are in the Coastal Plain, it's a little bit disproportionate weighted towards that. So we need to hopefully get some more testing in those other sites. I'm gonna take those off. I'm gonna look at Coastal Plain. Now look at, where's your D60? I think it's dropped. I don't think it's definitely not. Oh, it's down here. So it's dropped off a little bit when you're just looking at Coastal Plain. has more, a little bit better fit in the Piedmont and Tidewater. I mean, it's still above average in the coastal plain, so it's not doing bad at all. So top 10 there. You're picking up a decab 113.83. I think this is that same non-BT hybrid here. And you're picking up a couple of new ones. We'll compare there. Do my little magic. Deselect. And then deselect. So now you're picking up actually 4 out of the 10. Now here you're seeing some differences. For agent data, the decab, the 6835 showing at or just a little bit below trial average. Same with this non-BT hybrid that we saw, and same with this Dynagrow hybrid. So you're going to see some differences here. There's a variety of, like, small plots are going to give you a look. The power problems for small plots, the power is, I can't talk, the number of hybrids I can look at. The power for the agent tests are that you can now look at it at a larger scale on grower equipment and on different management practices than what I'm currently using. Different row spacings, different populations, different nitrogen managements. So you're going to have all of that baked into this data here. I don't know. We're pulling out populations and row spacings. We're trying to pull out soil types and stuff like that, CCs, percent organic matter, and pHs. I don't know why that's not representing here, but anyway, that data does exist in these data sets. So, we're trying to accommodate that as well, so we can look at the different management practices. The other thing here is it's single year, and for this decab, it was only at Gates County this last year. So it's, you need to have enough data there to kind of support how that hybrid's going to perform. But this is another look at what the coastal plain multiple year hybrids are. Okay. Any questions on that? So we've kind of done a quick look at, okay, I'm a grower. I want to look first at multiple year data specifically for my region, and I want to look at top 10, top 15, whatever the number is that I have the bandwidth for looking at. And I want to pull this out and I want to say, okay, what are these companies do I want to focus on? Are there retailers that I can find that have these more readily available? Are there other considerations here, that would limit this list? Maybe there's a price difference. Maybe, I have no idea. But it gives you at least a starting point for, these are the top 10, top 15 I want to start with, because these are going to work best for my region. And they're over multiple years, so I feel confident that they're going to work regardless of the weather environment that we have. Okay, that's your starting point. That's where the majority of your acres should be planted in, because that's where we feel the best about how these hybrids are going to perform. Now, again, we can't stop there because we have new hybrids coming out every single year. Some of these are going to rotate out, in the next 2 or 3 years, and we don't want to be stuck in a situation where we've been testing. We grew 6835 for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden it's gone, and we haven't tested a newer version of it or something that could replace it. So we need to look at single year data as well to make sure we're ready for those older hybrids rotating out and those newer hybrids and how they're going to fit for me. When I look at, like, single year data, hybrids for me are way ahead of, their market introduction for you as growers. Yes, they're available. They're probably available at volume, at some level of volume, but they're not typically mature in the marketplace. I don't know if that makes sense. So for me, I'm at the leading edge of some of the newer stuff that's coming out. So really, you're getting kind of a first or second year look at some of these hybrids. And then for you, it's an opportunity as a grower, as a retailer, to start seeing how they fit in these different environments. The same for me. I hope I can keep them on our testing for 2 or 3 years so we can kind of identify their multi-year fit. But it's really an early look at how these hybrids are performing for us here in the state. So I'm going to take off this filter because I want to look at 1 year data again. Now because we're looking at everything, you're going to be pulling in some 2-year data as well. I'm going to get rid of this filter view because it kind of gets in my way. And I'm only looking at 2025 averages. I can't do the sort by region here because I don't have enough data in each region for the last year for just 2025 to say that I feel confident about how they're performing. Yes, I've got 4 locations in the coastal plain, but that's 1 year of data. That's 1 year in data in the coastal plain where we were fairly wet early on, we were fairly dry later on, but we had good rainfall, so we performed fairly well. If I tried to make that selection last year, it's going to look completely different than this year, just based off the weather in that environment. So we really need to look at a statewide look here. And when we're looking at a statewide look, keep an eye on these Y2, Y1s over here in multiple year, like this FS line and this axis line we've already looked at. We've already pulled out from the multi-year looks we looked at. We don't necessarily need to look at them here. But this Stein line, this 975520, this is a gateway line. This is a gateway line. I might be wrong. Agritech line, sorry. This Agritech line, 807 tray. These are new. We can look at them. How they perform. They're near the top statewide. What I like doing here is I'm looking statewide to see how they perform, but I'm also pulling across and saying, okay, is there a specific region that they really did well in? And no, the answer for this Agritech line is they did well everywhere. So I'm gonna look at it. This 9720, or sorry, 975520. Again, did well. Now it has a little bit of a more fit in the coastal plain environments. We had 4 locations there. For me as a grower in the coastal plain, I would probably try this hybrid out based off this data here, but it actually did well across a lot of different regions there. This Augusta line was new this year, so we'll take a look at it. It didn't really have a difference here. So what I'm doing is I'm just going down. I'm looking at Y1s because we've already pulled out Y2s and Y3s. So I'm just looking at anything that's a Y1. Here's another good example. This 5911 VTP. This is from Cropland. So 5911 did well statewide, did well Tidewater, did really well coastal plain, tied with that Stein line and coastal plain. It's probably not something I would look at in the Piedmont environment. Not that it's a bad hybrid, it's a good hybrid, but it's at average in the Piedmont, right? That's how I'm treating these regional data. So I'm saying, yes, this is something I want to look at, but if I'm in a coastal plain environment, is this something that goes to the top of my list, or is this kind of if I can get a chance to look at it, I will? Or is this something I want to focus on? So that's the power here. Look at this. Well, that was I missed a Y1. Somebody didn't tell me I missed a Y1. This Dynagrow 55 TC 86, different look. Rod for you in the Tidewater. It's a brand new hybrid, right? Or it's a newer hybrid. I would definitely look at it and see how it's going to perform. It may not perform as well next year because we may be dry or wet or something different for the weather that we've had, but based off my 1-year data set, it was at the top of my Tidewater locations based on percent trial mean. Okay. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just looking at Y1s. I'm saying, okay, Y1, Y1. Here's another one. It's a decab line. I think this is actually a non-BT. So 6839 is a non-BT. Did well statewide. Again, had more of a fit in the coastal plain than the Piedmont. But you're looking at those for each one of these. And actually, you don't have to go all the way over to click. You can actually click while you're over here, and it'll select it for you. Okay, so I've got 9 there. Let me get 10. There's 10, and then I'm going to compare. I'm not going to drill down to, because you've already seen what it did regionally. You can make notes on how you want to sort those based off the regional looks, but you're getting the exact same look here. I'm not going to tell it that I just want to look at certain regions. I want to look statewide because we're looking at single year data. So we'll look at all of the data because that's a better view for it. But these are some good hybrids to start with. And again, notice our relative maturity spread. You're 111 all the way to 119. So you have a lot of good options regardless of the relative maturity. If I'm a grower, I'm picking multiple relative maturities so that I can spread that risk out. So that's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm looking at this data. I'm going to put this in the chat as single year. Thank you, Rod. I appreciate you helping me out today. Send this to everybody. Okay. That's what I'm looking at if I'm looking at corn hybrids. Now, you'll notice that for 2025, looking at single year, I don't have an agent piece here because we don't have that data in. That data will be in, I hope, by next week. I'm working furiously before I have to get back in the field to try to get that collated and integrated. But I'm really excited about those opportunities now. And that's kind of what I was been telling you agents that I want to start looking at. Now we have the opportunity to look at that dynamically in relation to OVT data instead of it being separate data sources. So. Anybody have any questions on what I've talked about? And Rod, if you could transcribe for me if somebody has questions, because I can't, I don't know what mic Jeremy uses, but it's not a
Yeah,
functional one.
yeah. If anyone has a question they want to ask, say it. If they don't want to type it in chat, and I'll try to get it to Ryan.
Okay. Well, thank y'all. I don't want to keep you. I appreciate your patience. Thank you for hanging on with me while I figured out why technology all of a sudden doesn't want to work today. I'm available if you have any questions that you didn't think about. Call me, email me, text me. I'm happy to help you out. I'm going to post this recording on YouTube, and I'll send that link out to everybody, both from on this call and globally across the agent list serve that we use for the data source. So please, agents, send that out out to your growers so they can use that if they weren't able to attend today. But I hope this gives you a good starting point for making your hybrid selections this coming year. Like I said, if you see anything that you have an issue about, let me know. But I appreciate your time, and yes, Stella, I can send you. I sent it to the. You may not have been on the. I used the new listserv that Rachel put together, so you may not have been on that list. But I'll send you the data tables so you have them. But thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate your help. And let me know if you need anything. Thank you. I don't currently have a filter by row width, Dale. I'm looking at trying to put that. Actually, I don't. I say that, and maybe I do. Let's look and see. We should be able to find that out fairly quickly. And what I didn't talk about is that we can look at the agent data separately from the OVT data. So let me go into the county data level and corn. So you can get and now that everybody's dropped off, I'm telling you all something completely different. You can actually look at setup filters. Why is this not showing? Oh, because I didn't tell it what I wanted. You can look at the agent data all by itself, just like you're looking at OVT data. That's what that looks like. It's a little bit more scattered because obviously not every hybrid's in every county. I think you can do a filter. You should be able to because the data exists in there by row spacing. Let me see if I can. If not, yeah, row spacing. So you can filter by row spacings anywhere from 20 to 36. Now you can only do this with the agent data because the OVT data is always 30 inches. But with the agent data, you can tell it that you want, well, it looks like you can do equal. You can do equal, less than, greater than. So let's say if you want to look at 20-inch row spacing, you can do 20 here and filter. And that should just give you any data that's only at, yeah, that just limits it now to like Gates and Pascatank were the only two that were on 20-inch row spacing this last year. Now you can make those filters. Like you can filter by population. There should be a population filter in here as well. Yeah, there is. So you can go in population, you can say, okay, I have a range of 25,000 and 35,000. You can tell it what range you're looking at. Now, again, not every agent location is going to have the specific thing. So you're going to be limited by what agent locations fit that. But yeah, that ability exists. So anybody have any other questions? Della, I will send you those data tables as soon as I get off the meeting. And I'll make sure that I might have used a different list, but I'll make sure you're on it. All right. Thank you all.